Pelé is called the king of football. He won the World Cup at just 17 and became a global symbol of success. But at one point, he almost lost control of his own life. From a very young age, he was no longer just a player. He became a national hero. Millions of people watched him, expected from him, and depended on him. He could not live like a normal person anymore. Every move was seen. Every mistake mattered. Success came very early, and it never slowed down. What happens when success comes too early and never stops? What does it feel like to carry the weight of an entire country? Today, you will learn English through the untold story of Pelé. In 1958, something extraordinary happened. At just 17 years old, Pelé became a world champion with Brazil in the FIFA World Cup. He scored important goals, including in the final, and quickly became one of the most talked-about players in the world. This was not normal success. It was sudden, global attention. Overnight, Pelé was no longer just a young football player. He became a national symbol. People in Brazil saw him as hope, pride, and identity. The media followed him closely, and fans admired him everywhere. The world was watching. But there was a hidden side to this moment. At 17, most people are still learning about life. They are making mistakes, growing slowly, and finding their identity. But Pelé did not have that space. He was expected to be great immediately. He was expected to win, perform, and represent his country at the highest level. There was no time to fail quietly, and there was no chance to develop without pressure. Every match mattered. Every action was judged. This created a difficult situation. From the outside, it looked like a dream. A young boy becoming a world champion, living a life full of success and admiration. But inside, the experience was very different. Pelé had to grow up quickly. He had to act like a leader, even though he was still very young. He had to manage attention, expectations, and responsibility at a level that most people never experience. He was not only playing football, he was carrying the image of a nation. This pressure did not stop after one tournament. After 1958, people expected him to continue at the same level. They wanted more goals, more victories, and more success. There was no normal life anymore. He could not walk freely without attention, and he could not make mistakes without criticism. Even small moments became important. This is the hidden cost of early success. When success comes too early, it can remove the time needed to grow naturally and create expectations that are difficult to manage. Pelé had talent, that is true, but talent alone was not the challenge. The real challenge was handling everything that came with it: responsibility, pressure, and expectation. At that moment, success was not freedom, it was pressure. After his early success, Pelé was no longer just a football player. He became something much bigger. To the public, he was a hero, a symbol of pride, and the king of football. People saw him as perfect. He was expected to win, to smile, and to represent success at all times. This was his public image. It looked powerful, stable, and inspiring. But this image came with a cost. Behind the success, there was a different reality. Pelé was constantly being watched. The media followed his career closely. Fans paid attention to everything he did, both on and off the field. There was very little privacy. Every performance was judged. Every mistake became a topic of discussion. This created a situation where failure was not acceptable. In normal life, people can make mistakes and learn quietly. They can improve over time without public pressure. But for Pelé, this was not possible. When he did not perform well, people noticed immediately. When the team lost, many blamed him. He was expected to always be at his best. This expectation did not come only from fans. It also came from the media, from football organizations, and from the country itself. Brazil saw him as more than a player. He was a national symbol. This made the pressure even stronger. He was not only playing for himself, he was playing for millions of people. This situation created internal tension. On the outside, he had to stay calm, confident, and positive. He had to smile, speak carefully, and act like everything was under control. But inside, the experience was different. He was still human. He could feel pressure. He could feel doubt. He could feel tired. But he could not show these feelings easily. There was an expectation that Pelé should always be strong. He was not allowed to appear uncertain or weak. This created a gap between who he was and who people expected him to be. He had to maintain the image of perfect Pelé. Over time, this became more difficult. Living under constant attention can affect how a person thinks and feels. It can create stress that is not always visible. It can make simple situations more complicated. Even small decisions can feel important when millions of people are watching. This is the pressure that many people do not see. From the outside, success looks like freedom. It looks like opportunity, recognition, and admiration. But in reality, it can also create limits. It can reduce privacy. It can increase expectations. Pelé had to live within these limits. He could not move freely like before. He could not make mistakes without consequences. He could not always act naturally. This is an important part of his story. Success gave him a platform, but it also created responsibility. It gave him recognition, but it also created pressure. Over time, this pressure became part of his life. He had to learn how to manage it. He had to continue performing, even when the situation was difficult. He had to stay focused, even when expectations were high. This required more than talent. It required mental strength. It required control. It required the ability to continue, even when there was no space to fail. From the outside, he had everything: success, fame, and admiration. But inside, the situation was more complex. From the outside, he had everything, but inside, he had no space to fail. This was not just success, it was a system he could not escape. By this stage, Pelé was no longer simply a football player. His identity had become fixed in the eyes of the world. He was the king. He was a symbol of excellence, discipline, and national pride. But this image was not something he could easily step away from. It followed him everywhere. This created what we can call a fame trap. He could not live like a normal person anymore. Simple activities became difficult. Going outside, meeting people, or even relaxing in public required attention and control. People expected him to behave in a certain way at all times. He was not only a person, he was an image. And once that image was created, it became very hard to change. This is the hidden structure of fame. It gives recognition, but it also defines identity. It creates opportunities, but it also limits freedom. Pelé had to protect his image carefully. One mistake could affect how millions of people saw him. This is where the emotional cost begins. Living under constant attention can lead to mental and emotional fatigue. The pressure does not come only from big events. It comes from everyday expectations. Always being careful. Always being watched. Always needing to perform. Over time, this can become exhausting. The mind does not always have time to rest. The person behind the image has fewer private moments. Even when there is no game, the pressure continues. This kind of pressure is different from physical effort. It is quiet, but constant. It builds slowly, but it does not disappear easily. Pelé had to carry this for many years. This leads to a deeper issue, the question of identity. When a person is known by one name, one role, and one image for a long time, it can create confusion. Who is the real person behind the image? Is he only Pelé, the football legend? Or is he also a normal person with private thoughts and feelings? This is not a simple question. When the world sees you in one way, it becomes difficult to separate yourself from that image. Over time, the role can become stronger than the individual. This creates internal tension. On one side, there is the public identity. On the other side, there is the personal self. Balancing these two is not easy. For Pelé, this balance was especially difficult because his success came so early and lasted for so long. He did not have a clear period of anonymity. He moved directly from young talent to global symbol. This means the pressure was continuous. There was no break. There was no time to step back and ask simple questions about identity and direction. Instead, he had to continue forward, carrying both his role and his expectations. This is the hidden cost of being a legend. From the outside, it looks like achievement. But from the inside, it can feel like responsibility without pause. Pelé's story shows that success is not only about reaching the top. It is also about living with what comes after. And sometimes, the highest success creates the deepest pressure. Over time, something began to change in Pelé's thinking. This change was not about performance on the field. It was about how he saw himself. For many years, he tried to meet every expectation. He tried to be perfect, to avoid mistakes, and to protect the image people had of him. But this approach was difficult to maintain. The pressure was constant, and it did not allow him to feel free. Slowly, he began to adjust his mindset. He started to understand that perfection was not possible. No one can always meet every expectation. No one can always be at their best. This realization was important. It allowed him to reduce some of the pressure he carried for so long. Instead of trying to prove himself all the time, he began to accept his role. He understood that people would always see him as a symbol. They would always connect him with success, football, and national pride. This could not be changed. But his relationship with that image could change. He no longer needed to fight it. He could work with it. This shift created a new direction. Pelé began to move from being only a player to becoming something larger. He became a representative of football on a global level. He traveled, met people from different countries, and spoke about the sport. He became a bridge between cultures, using football as a common language. This was a different kind of responsibility. Before, his main role was to perform. Now, his role was to represent. He was no longer defined only by what he did in a match. He was defined by how he influenced others. This change also affected how he saw himself. Earlier, his identity was closely connected to performance. Success meant winning, scoring, and meeting expectations. But now, his identity became broader. He was not only a player. He was a public figure. He was someone people looked up to, not only for skill, but also for example. This required a different type of understanding. He needed to think beyond the game. He needed to consider how his actions affected others. At the same time, this shift gave him more internal stability. When a person is only focused on performance, their identity becomes fragile. It depends on results. But when identity becomes broader, it becomes more stable. Pelé began to see himself in this wider way. He did not need to prove his value in every moment. He did not need to respond to every expectation. He could focus on understanding his place in a larger context. This is the key point of the shift. This time, he stopped trying to prove and started to understand who he was. This change did not remove all pressure. Expectations still existed. The public image was still strong. But his internal response was different. He was no longer reacting in the same way. He had more control over how he thought about success and identity. Instead of being defined only by the role of Pelé the player, he began to define himself more broadly as a person connected to the game, to people, and to a global audience. This is what makes this stage important. It shows that growth is not only about achieving more. It is also about understanding more. Pelé's story at this point is not about winning or losing. It is about redefining who he was beyond the expectations of others. Pelé's story is not only about success. It is also about what success brings with it. From the outside, his life looks like a dream, fame, admiration, and achievement. But when we look deeper, we can see something more complex. The first lesson is that success can also be pressure. When expectations become too high, they can feel heavy. Success does not always mean freedom. Sometimes, it creates responsibility that is difficult to carry. The second lesson is that being admired is not the same as being free. People may respect you, follow you, and look up to you, but that does not always mean you can live the way you want. Pelé had to follow expectations that were not always his own. Another important lesson is that identity is deeper than achievement. What you do is important, but it is not the only part of who you are. Pelé had to learn that he was more than a football player. He was a person with his own thoughts, feelings, and choices. Finally, growth means understanding yourself. It is not only about improving your skills or achieving more. It is about learning who you are, what matters to you, and how you want to live. Now, let's practice speaking together. Repeat after me. I don't have to be perfect. I grow through pressure. I define my own identity. Take your time. Speak clearly and slowly. You can pause and repeat to build confidence. Now, think about your own life. What expectation are you carrying that is not really yours? This could be something from family, society, or people around you. Take a moment to reflect. If you feel comfortable, share your answer in the comments below. If this story helped you see success in a new way, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to continue learning English through powerful and meaningful stories.